You know, some betrayals cut so deep you can feel them long after the words fade away. I remember the day I realized my own family, my children, the ones I raised with everything I had, would rather turn their backs than lift a finger for me. That wasn't the day I cried, though. That was the day I started to truly see them and to quietly plan. The silence that followed my plea for help wasn't just disappointing. It was the moment I realized I'd been invisible to the very people I'd spent my life making visible. My name is Linda Carter, and this is the story of how a mother's silent strength shook the very foundation of her family. Where are you tuning in from today? If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now, let me take you from the shadows of my family's secrets to the bright, sometimes painful light of truth. Mom, can you watch the kids this weekend? We really need a night out. Jenna's voice carried that familiar tone, not quite asking, more like assuming. I cradled the phone between my ear and shoulder while folding her children's laundry, clothes. I'd picked up from her house yesterday because she was too overwhelmed. Of course, sweetheart, I replied, just like I always did. I'm Linda Carter, 63 years old, and I've been saying of course to my 3 grown children for more years than I care to count. My husband Richard passed 5 years ago, leaving me not just widowed, but somehow more available than ever to be the family's solution to every problem. Great. We'll drop them off around 6, Jenna continued, already moving on to her next task. Oh, and Mom? Tyler needs new shoes for school. Could you grab some when you're out? I'll take care of it. You're the best. Love you. Bye. The line went dead before I could respond. I set the phone down and stared at the pile of tiny shirts and pants. 8 years old and 6 years old. Megan and Tyler, my grandchildren who I adored but seemed to parent more than their actual parents did. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark, my oldest. Mom, quick question. Can you co-sign on a loan for me? It's just a formality. You know how banks are about credit scores these days. What's the loan for, Mark? Investment property. Emily and I found this great place, but they want an additional signature. You won't have to pay anything, obviously. It's just paperwork. I paused, remembering the last just paperwork situation that ended up costing me $3,000 when his business partner disappeared. How much is the loan? $200,000, but like I said, it's just a signature. You trust me, right, Mom? Trust. Such a loaded word when it comes from a 40-year-old lawyer who should know better than to ask his retired mother to co-sign a loan that size. I'll need to think about it, Mark. Think about what? It's me, Mom. When have I ever let you down? The question hung in the air. I could think of several times, but Mark had a way of rewriting history to suit his narrative. Just give me a day or two, I said. Fine, but don't take too long. The seller wants to move fast. Another deadline. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the garden Richard and I had planted together. The roses were blooming beautifully, but I was the only one who seemed to notice anymore. My phone rang a third time. Daniel, my youngest at 35. Hey, Mom, you busy? Never too busy for you, honey. What's going on? I hate to ask, but I'm a little short on rent this month. The restaurant cut my hours, and you know how tight things are. This was the 4th month in a row Daniel had been short. Each time, I'd transferred money to his account without question, watching my own savings slowly dwindle. How much do you need? Just $800. I'll pay you back as soon as I pick up some catering gigs. Daniel, you said that last month too. I know. Things have just been crazy. But I've got some interviews lined up and… It's fine, I interrupted, because that's what I always did. I'll transfer it tonight. You're amazing, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you. But he'd never have to find out, would he? None of them would, because I was always here, always ready to say yes, always willing to be their safety net. After Daniel hung up, I sat in the quiet of my empty house. The afternoon sun streamed through the lace curtains I'd made 20 years ago, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. This house, our house, felt both full of memories and hollow with absence. Gloria knocked on my back door around 4, letting herself in like she had for the past 15 years of our friendship. "You look tired, Linda." "Just a busy day," I said, not mentioning the 3 phone calls that had drained my emotional bank account before noon. "Uh-huh." Gloria poured herself coffee from the pot I kept fresh all day. Another habit from when Richard was alive and the house was full of people who actually lived here. What did they want today? Who? Don't play dumb with me. Your children. I can see it in your face. Gloria was the only person who could read me like that. She saw what my own family missed. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of a woman who'd forgotten how to say no. "Jenna needs babysitting. Mark wants me to co-sign a loan, and Daniel needs rent money. And you said yes to all of them." It wasn't a question. "They're my children, Gloria." "They're adults, Linda. When was the last time any of them asked how you were doing? Really asked?" I couldn't remember. Our conversations always started with their needs, their problems, their requests. Even when they asked, "How are you?" it was perfunctory, a social nicety before getting to the real reason for their call. "You give too much," Gloria continued, settling into the chair Richard used to occupy. "They take you for granted. They love me." "I'm sure they do. But love isn't just taking, honey. It's giving, too. When was the last time Mark offered to help with your yard work? When was the last time Jenna invited you somewhere without needing something? When was the last time Daniel paid you back?" Each question hit like a gentle slap. I knew the answers. Never, never, and never. They have their own lives, their own problems. And you don't? I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it. The truth was, I'd been having some problems lately. Problems I hadn't mentioned to anyone, not even Gloria. Problems that kept me awake at night and made me dizzy when I stood up too fast. "Linda?" Gloria leaned forward, her voice softer now. "What is it?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "Nothing. Just tired." But it wasn't nothing. The doctor's appointment last week, the blood tests, the concerned look on Dr. Patterson's face when he said we needed to run a few more tests. It was all very much something. Something I wasn't ready to face, let alone share. Gloria stayed until 6 when Jenna arrived with the children. My daughter breezed in wearing a new dress and expensive shoes, looking radiant and carefree. "Mom, you're a lifesaver. We haven't had a date night in months." "Where are you going?" I asked, hugging Megan and Tyler. "That new Italian place downtown. Tom got reservations somehow." She kissed my cheek, leaving a trace of her perfume. "Kids have eaten dinner, but Tyler might want a snack later, and Megan needs to practice her spelling words." I nodded, already, mentally organizing the evening around their needs. "We'll probably be late, so don't wait up. Love you." And she was gone, leaving me with 2 beautiful children who immediately ran to the toy box I kept stocked just for them. At least someone in this family was happy to see me. "Grandma, can we make cookies?" Megan asked, her gap-toothed smile irresistible. "Of course we can, sweetheart." As I helped them measure flour and crack eggs, I felt a familiar warmth. This was what love looked like. Time given freely, attention paid fully, presence offered, without condition. Why couldn't my own children understand that this was what I needed too? Later, after the kids were asleep and I was cleaning cookie sheets, I allowed myself to wonder what would happen if I weren't here. Would they figure out babysitting on their own? Would Mark learn to manage his finances? Would Daniel finally grow up? The questions scared me more than the doctor's appointment next week. Not because I was afraid to die, but because I was afraid. They might not even notice I was gone until they needed something I could no longer provide. I finished cleaning the kitchen, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to my empty bedroom. Tomorrow would bring another day of being needed but not seen, wanted but not appreciated. For now, though, I was tired of being the quiet backbone of a family that had forgotten I had needs of my own. Dr. Patterson's words echoed in my head as I drove home from the hospital. The surgery isn't optional, Linda. We need to address this before it becomes life-threatening. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the worn leather. Ovarian cysts, some complex, some potentially dangerous. The insurance would cover 60%, leaving me with a bill that would wipe out most of my savings. For the first time in 5 years, I needed help. Real help. I called Mark first, figuring a lawyer would understand the practical aspects. Mom? What's up? I'm between meetings. I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over tonight? Tonight's not great. Emily has that work thing and… Mark, this is about my health. The line went quiet for a moment. Are you okay? I need surgery. Can you please just come over? Bring Emily if you need to. I'll call Jenna and Daniel too. Surgery? Mom, you can't just drop something like that and… 7 o'clock, I said firmly. Please. I hung up before he could make more excuses. Jenna answered on the first ring, but her response was predictable. Oh no, Mom. Tonight? Tom's working late, and the kids have soccer practice and… Jenna, I have cancer. I didn't exactly. The doctors weren't sure yet. But sometimes you have to speak their language to get their attention. What? Mom, no, are you… How bad is it? 7 o'clock. We'll talk then. Daniel was the easiest to reach but the hardest to pin down. Surgery? Damn, Mom, that's heavy. Yeah, I'll be there. Do you need me to bring anything? Just yourself, honey. At 7:15, they were all assembled in my living room, the same room where we'd celebrated birthdays, opened Christmas presents, and held Richard's memorial service. Mark sat rigidly in his father's chair, checking his phone every few minutes. Jenna perched on the edge of the sofa, clearly anxious to get home. Daniel sprawled in the recliner, looking genuinely concerned but slightly stoned. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to tell you something, and then I need to ask you something. I explained the diagnosis, the surgery, the timeline. As I spoke, I watched their faces. Mark's lawyer mask was firmly in place. Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but she kept glancing at her watch. Daniel leaned forward, engaged for once. So the surgery is scheduled for next month, I concluded. Recovery will take about 6 weeks. That's rough, Mom, Daniel said. But you'll be fine, right? I mean, doctors can fix this stuff now. They can, but… I took a breath, feeling every one of my 63 years. The insurance only covers part of it. I need help with the rest. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 adults, my children, avoiding eye contact. Mark cleared his throat. First, how much are we talking about? $25,000. Jenna's sharp intake of breath was audible. Mark's jaw tightened. Daniel whistled low. Mom, that's… Mark shook his head. That's a lot of money. I know it is. That's why I'm asking for help. More silence. Mark studied his hands. Jenna twisted her wedding ring. Daniel stared at the ceiling. The thing is, Mark finally said, Emily and I just committed to that investment property. We're leveraged. Pretty heavily right now. You found another co-signer for the loan? His face flushed slightly. We've found another solution, but the point is, our finances are tight. I turned to Jenna. Honey? Mom, I wish I could, but Tom's been laid off for 3 weeks. We're barely making our mortgage payments. If I had it, you know I'd give it to you in a heartbeat. That left Daniel, who was my least likely candidate but sometimes surprised me. I'm broke, Mom. You know that. I can't even pay my own rent half the time. The room fell quiet again. I looked at each of them, these people I'd raised, supported, sacrificed for. The people who called when they needed babysitting, co-signing, rent money. The people who'd just told me that my life-saving surgery wasn't their priority. I see, I said quietly. Mom, don't look at us like that, Jenna said, tears starting to flow. It's not that we don't want to help. We just can't right now. When would be a better time? I asked. After the surgery? After I'm dead? Don't be dramatic, Mark snapped. You said yourself it's not cancer. It could become cancer if left untreated. Or it could rupture and cause internal bleeding. But you're right, it's not dramatic at all. Look, maybe we can work something out, Mark said, his lawyer voice kicking in. A payment plan or something. You could get a home equity loan. On what equity? I've refinanced this house twice to help your family when you were in trouble. His face reddened. That was different. How? Because I paid you back. 18 months later, and only after I threatened to take you to court. Jenna stood up abruptly. I can't do this right now. The kids need to get home, and Tom's probably wondering where I am. Of course, I said. Heaven forbid Tom should wonder. Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you wondered where I was? When was the last time any of you called just to see how I was doing? None of them answered because they couldn't. The truth hung in the air between us like smoke. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we could all pitch in something small? Like, I could probably manage $100. $100 toward a $25,000 bill. It's something, he said defensively. It's insulting. Mark stood up, straightening his tie. Mom, I think you need to understand that we're all adults with our own responsibilities. We can't drop everything every time you have a problem. Every time? I stood too, feeling anger rise in my chest like heat. When was the last time I asked any of you for anything? You're always asking for help with the house, or I'm asking you to help me fix a leaky faucet or move furniture. When have I ever asked you for money? He didn't answer because he knew the truth. In 30 years of their adult lives, I'd given them tens of thousands of dollars, countless hours of babysitting, endless emotional support. And this was the first time I'd ever asked for anything in return. We should go, Jenna said, kissing my cheek quickly. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? But she wouldn't. None of them would, not until they needed something. After they left, I sat in the empty living room, surrounded by photos of happier times. Times when they were small and needed me for everything. Times when their love felt unconditional because their needs were simple. My phone rang. Gloria. How did it go? About how you'd expect. They said no. They said they can't. Different. Words, same result. Gloria was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, honey. I am too. More than you know. After we hung up, I walked through my house, the house I'd maintained alone since Richard died, the house I'd refinanced to bail out my children, the house where I'd raised 3 people who'd just told me I wasn't worth $25,000. But I was worth more than that. Much more. And maybe it was time they learned exactly how much. Did you get the group text about brunch? Daniel's voice sounded casual, too casual. I was in my garden, trying to coax life from the roses. Richard had planted when my phone buzzed with his call. It had been 2 weeks since the living room conversation. 2 weeks of careful silence from all 3 children. What group text? Oh. A pause. The one about Sunday brunch at your place. Jenna's organizing it. At my place? Yeah, she Said she couldn't find anywhere else big enough for everyone. Grandparents and their families, you know. I set down my pruning shears. Daniel, I wasn't included in any group text. Another pause, longer this time. That's weird. Maybe it was a mistake? But we both knew it wasn't a mistake. Nothing my children did was ever a mistake. It was always a choice. What time is this brunch happening? 11:30. But hey, maybe you shouldn't worry about it if you weren't invited. Might be some kind of mix-up. After Daniel hung up, I sat on my garden bench and stared at the house that had sheltered my family for 30 years. They were planning a family gathering at my home without inviting me. The audacity was breathtaking. I called Jenna directly. Mom, hi. How are you feeling? I'm fine. Daniel mentioned a brunch happening here on Sunday? Silence. Jenna? Oh, that. It's just a small thing. Tom's parents are in town, and I thought it would be nice to have everyone together. At my house? Well, yeah. My place is too small, and your house has always been the family gathering spot. And you didn't think to invite me? Of course you're invited. I just figured you might want to rest, with everything you're dealing with. The lie sat between us like a stone. If I'd been invited, I'd have been in the group text. If they'd wanted me there, they wouldn't have planned it as a surprise gathering in my own home. What time should I expect everyone? You really don't have to worry about hosting, Mom. We'll take care of everything. In my house. It's just easier this way. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I'd spent Saturday cleaning, not for them, but for me, because I couldn't bear the thought of them criticizing my housekeeping on top of everything else. At 11:15, cars began pulling into my driveway. I watched from my bedroom window as my children emerged with their families, carrying covered dishes and gift bags. Tom's parents climbed out of a rental car, looking around appreciatively at the home and garden I'd maintained alone for 5 years. I heard the front door open, Jenna using the key I'd given her for emergencies. Voices filled my house, laughter, echoing through rooms where I'd been sitting alone for weeks. Grandma's probably still sleeping, I heard Jenna tell her children. Let's let her rest. I dressed carefully in my best blue dress and walked downstairs. The living room was full of people I should have been happy to see. Mark's family clustered around the coffee table, Emily showing off photos on her phone. Tom's parents admired the family pictures on the mantel. Jenna bustled in the kitchen, arranging food she hadn't prepared on dishes I'd bought. Mom! She looked genuinely surprised to see me. You're up. How are you feeling? Fine, thank you. This is quite a gathering. Isn't it nice? Tom's parents? Haven't been here in ages. Tom's mother, Patricia, approached with a warm smile. Linda, your home is just beautiful. Jenna was telling us about your garden. Thank you, Patricia. I didn't realize we were having company. The room went quiet. Patricia looked confused, glancing between Jenna and me. Oh, Patricia said slowly. I thought, weren't you the one who suggested brunch here? No, I said calmly. I wasn't. Mark appeared from the kitchen carrying a mimosa. Mom, there you are. We didn't want to wake you. How thoughtful. Emily joined us, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Carter, thank you for hosting. The house looks lovely. I'm not hosting, I said. I wasn't invited. The silence spread through the room like spilled wine. Patricia looked mortified. Tom's father, George, cleared his throat and excused himself to the bathroom. Even the grandchildren seemed to sense the tension. Mom, Jenna said in a low voice, can we talk privately? I think we've done enough talking privately, don't you? Mrs. Carter, Patricia interjected gently, I think there's been some misunderstanding. We should probably go. Please don't leave on my account, I said. You're welcome here. You were actually invited. Mark set down his mimosa with more force than necessary. Mom, what's your point? My point is that this is my home, my house, which I pay for, maintain, and live in alone, and my own children thought it was appropriate to throw a party here without including me. It's not a party, Jenna protested. It's just brunch. A brunch you planned in secret. A brunch you organized in my home while excluding me from your group text. A brunch where you told your children their grandmother was sleeping when I was right upstairs, listening to you pretend I didn't exist. Tom's parents exchanged glances. We should really go, Patricia said again. No, I said firmly. You traveled here to spend time with family. That's what family gatherings are supposed to be about. Spending time together, including everyone, making sure no one feels left out. I looked at each of my children in turn. But I guess I raised children who think family is something you do around someone, not with them. That's not fair, Daniel said from the doorway, where he'd been listening. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you invited me anywhere? When was the last time you included me in your plans instead of just expecting me to accommodate them? No one answered. I asked you for help 2 weeks ago, the first time in my adult life I've ever asked any of you for help. And you told me you couldn't afford it, that your own problems were more important than my health. Mom, that's not, Mark started. But you can afford new dresses and expensive restaurants and gift bags for a brunch party you threw without? Inviting the woman who owns the house you're standing in. Patricia was gathering her purse. Tom, we should let your family work this out privately. You are family, I said to her. More family than I've felt with my own children in a very long time. After Tom's parents left, the room felt smaller, more volatile. My grandchildren had retreated to the backyard, sensing the adult conversation was beyond their understanding. I think you're overreacting, Mark said. Do you? How would you feel if Emily's family threw a party at your house, without inviting you? That's different. How? Because... He struggled for an answer. Because it just is. Because you're the children and I'm just the mother. I'm here to provide the house, maintain the space, clean up afterward, but not actually participate in the family. Jenna started crying. That's not true, Mom. Then why am I standing in my own living room feeling like an intruder? Nobody had an answer for that either. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Mom. Daniel stepped forward. I want all of you to take your food, your families, and your excuses, and leave my house. You don't mean that, Jenna sobbed. I mean it more than anything I've said in years. They left, slowly and with backward glances, as if expecting me to change my mind and run after them with apologies. But I stood in my doorway and watched their cars pull away, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades. Relief. After they were gone, I walked through my house, collecting the debris of their abbreviated gathering. Napkins dropped carelessly, on tables, glasses left with lipstick stains, a mimosa spilled on my hardwood floor. As I cleaned up their mess for what I decided would be the last time, I realized something important. I wasn't just invisible to them. I was dispensable. A resource to be used, a space to be occupied, a problem to be managed. But resources can be withdrawn. Spaces can be reclaimed. And problems can be solved. You look different, Gloria said, settling into her usual chair with her coffee mug. Better somehow. It was Monday afternoon, and I'd spent the morning doing something I'd never done before, making a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but an inventory, a catalog of exactly what power I'd been giving away without realizing it. I feel different, I admitted, clearer. The brunch was that bad? The brunch was exactly what I needed to see. I pulled out a manila folder I'd compiled the night before. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, receipts, and photographs. A paper trail of 30 years of financial support that told a story my children had forgotten. Gloria, did you know I've lent or given my children over $150,000 in the past 15 years? She nearly choked on her coffee. What? Mark's business loan when he was starting his practice, $25,000. The down payment for Jenna's first house, $30,000. Daniel's car, his culinary school tuition, his credit card debt, his rent money, it adds up. I opened the folder and spread the documents across my kitchen table. Each piece of paper represented a moment when I'd said yes without thinking, when I'd prioritized their needs over my own financial security. My God, Linda, do they know how much it's been? I don't think they've ever added it up. Each request was separate, isolated. Just this once, Mom. I'll pay you back. It's just a loan. But I'd added it up now, and the total was staggering. There's more, I continued, pulling out another document. This house? It's worth $400,000 and it's paid off. Richard and I bought it for $60,000 in 1987. They know that, right? Mark thinks there's still a mortgage. I never corrected him when he made that assumption last year. Gloria studied the deed in my hands. Linda Marie Carter, sole owner. Richard? Put it in my name when he got sick to avoid probate issues. The kids were too busy with their own lives to pay attention to legal details. I showed her more documents. The investment account Richard had set up that matured after his death. The insurance payout that was larger than I'd ever mentioned. The modest but steady income from the rental property downtown that Daniel didn't know existed. You're not the struggling widow they think you are. I'm comfortable, not wealthy, but secure. Secure enough to help my children when they needed it, foolish enough to think they'd help me when I needed them. Gloria picked up a bank statement showing automatic transfers to Daniel's account. How long has this been going on? 8 months, $600 a month for his rent and expenses. He told you his hours were cut. They were, in January, but the restaurant promoted him to assistant manager in March. I found out by accident when Tyler mentioned Uncle Daniel's new job. The lie hurt more than the money. Not because he was deceiving me about his finances, but because he felt he needed to. As if honesty might jeopardize his monthly allowance from Mom. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? For 30 years, I'd been reacting to my children's crises, responding to their needs, accommodating their requests. I'd never been the one making plans, setting terms, controlling outcomes. I'm going to stop being their victim. Meaning? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I'd spent Sunday afternoon after they left. The roses were blooming beautifully, despite my neglect. Sometimes things thrived when you stopped hovering over them. Meaning I'm going to teach them what I'm actually worth. Revenge? Education. Gloria laughed. Is there a difference? Revenge is about punishment. Education is about consequences. My children have never experienced the consequences of taking me for granted because I've always protected them from those consequences. I returned to the table and organized the documents into neat piles. Did you know Mark still has my name on that business loan from 2018? The one he said was just paperwork? The one you're not supposed to have to pay? The one that shows up on my credit report every month? The one that affects my credit score, my borrowing capacity, my financial profile? Gloria examined the loan document. He never took you off it? Never even tried. Why would he? From his perspective, having Mom as a co-signer is free insurance. If something goes wrong, it's my problem too. I pulled out another file. And Jenna's mortgage. When Tom lost his job 3 years ago, guess who they called for help with payments? You paid their mortgage? For 6 months, $12,000 to keep them from losing their house. Tom found another job, they got back on their feet, and somehow they forgot to pay me back. Did you ask them to? I mentioned it once. Jenna said they were still catching up from the unemployment period. That was 2 years ago. The pattern was clear now, spread across my kitchen table in black and white. I wasn't just generous. I was being used. And I'd enabled it by never demanding accountability, never setting boundaries, never saying no. "So what's the plan?" Gloria asked. I gathered the papers and returned them to the folder. "First, I'm going to stop the automatic transfers to Daniel's account. He'll call. I'm sure he will." "What will you tell him?" "The truth, that he has a job and doesn't need his mother's rent money anymore." Gloria nodded approvingly. "What about Mark's loan?" "I'm going to ask him to refinance it without my name. He's established now, successful. He doesn't need his mother's credit anymore." "And if he refuses? Then he'll learn what happens when you take someone for granted who has the power to make your life very complicated." "Jenna?" I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. "Jenna's about to discover that her emergency babysitter has other plans." "You're not going to watch the kids anymore?" "I'm going. To be selective about when I'm available. Very selective." Gloria leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "You know they're not going to like this." "I don't need them to like it. I need them to respect it." "They might get angry." "They might, but they can't get any more dismissive than they already are. They can't take me any more for granted than they already do. The worst-case scenario is that our relationship stays exactly the same, and the best-case scenario." I closed the folder and held it against my chest. "The best-case scenario is that they remember I'm their mother, not their employee." That evening, I made my first phone call. "Daniel, it's Mom." "Hey, what's up? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I'm calling to let you know I won't be transferring rent money to your account anymore." Silence. "Daniel?" "Yeah, I'm here. Why? Did I do something wrong?" "You didn't tell me about your promotion." Another pause. Who told you?" "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that you've been letting me pay your rent for 6 months while you had the money to pay it yourself." "Mom, it's not like that. The promotion is new and I'm still catching up on bills and—" "Daniel, I love you. But I'm not your bank account." "I know that. I never said you were." "Then you'll understand why I'm closing that particular service." After I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. One conversation down, several more to go. Change was coming to the Carter family, whether they were ready for it or not. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." I smiled as I listened to the automated message on Daniel's old apartment line. He'd moved 2 weeks ago, into a nicer place according to Tyler, who'd mentioned Uncle Daniel's cool new apartment with the big TV during our last conversation. Interesting how quickly he'd upgraded once Mom's monthly subsidy ended. "You look pleased with yourself," Gloria observed, finding me in my garden on a Wednesday afternoon. I was transplanting the roses Richard had loved, moving them to a sunnier spot where they'd thrive better. "Daniel moved into a better apartment. Without your rent money?" Amazing what people can accomplish when they stop depending on their mothers. It had been 3 weeks since I'd begun what I privately called the education. Small steps, quiet changes, strategic withdrawals of support that my children had taken for granted. The results were already visible. "Any word from Jenna about babysitting?" She called yesterday, very politely asked if I was available this weekend for the kids. "And?" I told her I had plans. Gloria raised an eyebrow. "Do you have plans?" "I'm having lunch with you on Saturday, aren't I?" "That's 2 hours, not all day." She doesn't need to know that. The truth was, I'd realized something important. My time was valuable, and I'd been giving it away without consideration for my own needs. For years, I'd canceled plans, rearranged schedules, and prioritized everyone else's convenience over my own. Not anymore. What about Mark's loan situation? I set down my gardening spade and brushed dirt from my hands. I sent him a very polite letter last week, requesting that he refinance without my name on the paperwork. Polite? Extremely polite. Professional, even. I explained that as I get older, I need to simplify my financial obligations. How did he respond? He didn't, yet. But he would. The loan payment was due in 10 days, and the bank had my contact information as the co-signer. If Mark thought he could ignore my request, he'd learn otherwise soon enough. My phone rang as if summoned by our conversation. Jenna's name appeared on the screen. Hi, sweetheart. Mom, I have a huge favor to ask. Her voice carried that familiar tone of crisis barely contained. Tom's mother fell and broke her hip. We need to fly to Phoenix immediately, but we can't afford to bring the kids, and… When do you need to leave? Tonight, if possible. The flight's at 8. I glanced at my watch. It was 3:30. That's very short notice, Jenna. I know, but it's an emergency, and you're the only one I trust with Megan and Tyler. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately, dropped everything, and rearranged my life around their crisis. Today, I paused. How long would you need me to watch them? Maybe a week? Tom's mother lives alone, and we need to figure out her care situation. A week. 7 days and nights of full-time childcare with 5 hours notice. I'm sorry, honey, but I can't do it. Silence. What do you mean you can't do it? I mean, I'm not available for a week of full-time babysitting with this little notice. But Mom, it's an emergency. Tom's mother could have died. I understand it's an emergency, but my availability isn't unlimited. What else could you possibly have to do? There it was, the assumption that my life was empty except for their needs, that my time had no value except when they required it. I have my own life, Jenna, my own plans, my own commitments. Like what? Like doctor's appointments for my upcoming surgery, like managing my own health crisis, which you seem to have forgotten about. Another silence, longer this time. I didn't forget. I just thought. I mean, your surgery isn't until next month. So my medical concerns should be postponed for your family emergency? That's not what I meant. What did you mean? She couldn't answer because we both knew what she'd meant. That my problems were less important than hers, that my needs came second to her convenience, that I existed to solve her crises regardless of my own circumstances. What am I supposed to do? She asked finally. The same thing you'd do if I lived in another state. Find alternative childcare. But you don't live in another state. You live 20 minutes away. Which doesn't make me automatically available. After she hung up, angry and frustrated, I sat in my garden and thought about the conversation. For the first time in my adult relationship with my children, I'd said no to a request for help. Not because I was being cruel, but because I was being realistic about my own limitations. Within an hour, my phone rang again. Mark this time. Mom, Jenna called me crying. What's this about you refusing to help with the kids? It's about me being unavailable for last-minute, week-long childcare commitments. It's an emergency, Mom. It's their emergency, not mine. Since when are you so selfish? The word hung in the air between us. Selfish. After 30 years of selfless service to my children, the first time I prioritized my own needs, I was selfish. Since when is setting boundaries selfish, Mark? You're their grandmother. Family helps family. Does it? Because when I needed help with my medical bills, where was family then? He didn't answer. Let me ask you something, I continued. When was the last time any of you helped me with anything? When was the last time you offered to help with my yard work or my house maintenance, or even just called to see how I was doing? That's different. How? Because you never ask for help. I asked 3 weeks ago. You said no. That was about money. This is about babysitting. So my time is less valuable than my money? He sputtered for a moment. It's not the same thing. You're right, it's not. Money can be replaced. Time can't. After Mark hung up, I made myself tea and sat down with the journal I'd started keeping. Every day I wrote down my thoughts, my feelings, and my observations about this process of reclaiming my dignity. Day 23 of the education, I wrote. Jenna called me selfish for having boundaries. Mark called me unreasonable for prioritizing my own health. Neither of them has asked how I'm feeling about my upcoming surgery. Neither has offered alternative ways to help me through this difficult time. They want me to be available for their emergencies while remaining invisible during my own. Gloria knocked on my door around 7, letting herself in as usual. How did it go with Jenna's crisis? I said no. How does it feel? Terrible and wonderful at the same time. She laughed. That sounds about right. Anything else happened today? I showed her the letter that had arrived in the afternoon. Mail. From Mark's bank, addressed to me as co-signer on his business loan. Payment is 30 days overdue, Gloria read aloud. He's testing me, I said, seeing if I'll just pay it to avoid the hassle. Will you? I thought about it. The payment was $800. Not an enormous sum, but not insignificant either. For years, I would have paid it without question, then mentioned it to Mark casually, letting him off the hook with minimal embarrassment. No, I said. I won't. What if it affects your credit? It's already affecting my credit just by being on there. But that's Mark's problem to solve, not mine. That evening, I called him. Mark, I received a notice from your bank today. What notice? About the overdue payment on your business loan, the one I co-signed. Silence. I thought you should know that I won't be making the payment for you. Mom, I just forgot. I'll take care of it tomorrow. Good. And while you're taking care of it, please arrange to have my name removed from the loan entirely. Why? Because I'm not your business partner, and I shouldn't be responsible for your business debts. It's just a formality. You'll never have to pay anything. Then you won't mind removing my name. Another silence. It might affect the interest rate, he said finally. That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem. Mom, what's gotten into you lately? You're acting so... So what? So cold, so calculating. I thought about that for a moment. Maybe I'm just tired of being warm and generous to people who take advantage of it. After he hung up, I sat in Richard's chair and looked around the living room where we'd raised our family. The photos on the mantel showed happier times, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduations. Times when my children's love felt unconditional because their needs were simple. But needs weren't simple anymore, and neither was love. Real, love required respect, consideration, and reciprocity. What I'd been giving wasn't love, it was enabling. And what I'd been receiving wasn't love either. It was exploitation disguised as affection. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mom, it's Jenna. I'm using Tom's phone. We found a babysitter for the kids. I hope you're happy. I wasn't happy. I was something much more valuable. I was free. Free from the obligation to fix every problem, solve every crisis, and sacrifice my own needs for their convenience. Free from the assumption that my time, money, and energy existed solely for their benefit. For the first time in decades, I was free to choose when, how, and if I helped my children. And that choice, that power, was going to change everything. Mrs. Carter, this is Amanda from First National Bank. I'm calling about the Richards account. Loan number 4471. The payment is now 60 days overdue. I set down my coffee and reached for the notepad I kept by the phone. I'm the co-signer, not the primary borrower. You'll need to contact Mark Richards directly. We've been trying to reach Mr. Richards for 3 weeks. His phone appears to be disconnected, and our letters have gone unanswered. Interesting. Mark's phone was definitely not disconnected. He'd called me just yesterday to complain about my unreasonable demands regarding the loan. I see. What exactly are you asking me to do? As co-signer, you're equally responsible for the debt. We need immediate payment of $1,847 to bring the account current. I understand my legal obligation. However, I won't be making the payment. You'll need to pursue collection through Mr. Richards. Amanda's tone shifted, becoming more formal. Mrs. Carter, if payment isn't received within 10 days, we'll be forced to report this delinquency to the credit bureaus. This will affect your credit score. I understand. Thank you for calling. After I hung up, I wrote the date and details in my journal. Mark was playing a dangerous game, gambling that I'd cave under pressure rather than let my credit be damaged. What he didn't realize was that I'd already checked my credit report and spoken with a financial advisor about my options. My credit was excellent, built over decades of responsible financial management. One late payment wouldn't destroy it, but it would certainly send a message. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Mark, sounding frantic. Mom, did the bank call? You? They did. I can explain. There was a mix-up with the automatic payment and, Mark, I don't need explanations. I need you to remove my name from that loan. I'm working on it, but these things take time and... How much time? Maybe a few weeks, a month at most. The bank wants payment in 10 days, or it goes on my credit report. Just make the payment, Mom. I'll reimburse you immediately. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm not making your business loan payment. His voice rose. This is ridiculous. It's $1,800. You can afford it. Whether I can afford it isn't the issue. Then what is the issue? The issue is that you're a successful 40-year-old lawyer who signed up for this debt and needs to pay it himself. I would pay it myself if... If what? He went quiet for a moment. If I had the cash available right now. There it was, the truth he hadn't wanted to admit. Mark, with his expensive suits and his investment properties and his lectures about family responsibility, was cash poor. Then you have 10 days to find the cash or work something out with the bank. Mom, please. You don't understand how complicated my finances are right now. Then perhaps you shouldn't have committed to debts you couldn't afford. Everyone has cash flow issues sometimes. Not everyone asks their 63-year-old mother to co-sign loans for debts they can't manage. After he hung up, I called Gloria. How does it feel to have the upper hand for once? She asked after I'd explained the situation. Terrifying and empowering at the same time. Any regrets? I thought about it. Not yet. But ask me again in a few days when Mark realizes I'm serious. The test came sooner than expected. That evening, Emily showed up at my door with her 2 children, Mark's kids, my grandchildren. Linda, we need to talk. I invited them in, noting how Emily avoided eye contact while the kids ran to the toy box I kept stocked for their visits. Mark told me about the loan situation, Emily began, settling stiffly on my sofa. Did he? He's really struggling right now. The investment property isn't generating the income he projected, and there have been some unexpected expenses. I see. The thing is, if that loan goes into default, it could affect his ability to practice law. The Bar Association reviews financial issues and... Emily, are you asking me to pay Mark's debt to protect his career? She flushed. I'm asking you to help your son through a difficult time. The way he helped me through my difficult time? She looked confused. What difficult time? My surgery, the medical bills, the fact that I'll be recovering alone for 6 weeks because none of my children were available to help. That's different. How? Because... She struggled for words. Because that's medical stuff. This is about Mark's livelihood. I watched my grandchildren playing with toys I'd bought in a house I maintained, while their mother asked me to sacrifice my financial principles to protect their father's pride. Emily, do you know how much money I've lent or given your family over the years? Some, I guess. Mark doesn't really discuss those details with me. $43,000. Not counting the co-signing, which puts me at risk for hundreds of thousands more. Her face went pale. I had no idea it was that much. Neither did Mark, apparently. He's never added it up. Look, I know you've been generous. I haven't been generous. I've been enabling. There's a difference. She gathered her composure, shifting to a more businesslike tone. What exactly do you want, Linda? I want my name off that loan. I want Mark to take responsibility for his own debts, and I want to be treated like a person with needs and limitations, not an ATM with unlimited funds. And if Mark can't make the payment, then he'll learn the same lesson everyone else learns when they overextend themselves financially. Emily stood up, calling to her children. We should go. You're welcome to stay longer. The kids seem to be enjoying themselves. I don't think that's a good idea right now. After they left, I sat in the quiet of my house and wondered if this was what victory felt like, hollow and lonely, but somehow necessary. 2 days later, Jenna called. Mom, I heard about Mark's loan troubles. Did you? Emily called me. She's really upset. I imagine she is. Mom, what's happening to you? This isn't like you at all. What isn't like me? This coldness, this selfishness. We're family. Family helps family. You keep saying that, but when I needed help, where was family? That was different. Stop saying it was different, I snapped, surprising myself with the anger in my voice. Stop making excuses for why your problems are emergencies that require my immediate attention, but my problems are inconveniences you can't be bothered. Jenna was quiet for a moment. I didn't realize you felt that way. Because you never asked. I ask how you are all the time. No, you ask how I am as a polite greeting before telling me what you need. There's a difference. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you invited me somewhere that wasn't about childcare or some favor you needed? She couldn't answer. I'm not being cruel, Jenna. I'm just tired of being invisible except when you need something. After she hung up, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in our adult relationship, I'd expressed my true feelings to my children instead of just accommodating theirs. It felt dangerous and necessary, like surgery, painful but required for healing. Mrs. Whitaker knocked on my door the next morning, carrying a plate of homemade cookies. Linda, dear, is everything all right? I couldn't help noticing there haven't been as many cars in your driveway lately. I invited her in, grateful for neutral company. Things are changing with my family. Good changes or difficult changes? I thought about it. Both, I think. Mrs. Whitaker nodded knowingly. Sometimes the most important changes are the hardest ones to make. Did you ever have to set boundaries with your children? Oh, honey. Boundaries aren't something you set once. They're something you maintain constantly. Children will push against them until they understand you're serious. What if they don't understand? What if they just get angry and stop coming around? Mrs. Whitaker smiled sadly. Then you'll learn whether they love you or just what you provide for them. That afternoon, my phone rang. The bank again. Mrs. Carter, this is Amanda from First National. The payment deadline has passed, and we haven't received payment from either party. I understand. We're required to report this delinquency to the credit bureaus. Is there anything you'd like to do to prevent that? No, thank you. Mrs. Carter, I have to tell you, this is unusual. Most co-signers work with us to protect their credit. I'm not most co-signers. After I hung up, I made a note in my journal. Day 31 of the education. Let my credit take a hit rather than enable Mark's financial irresponsibility. First time in my life I've chosen my principles over my children's convenience. The ground was shifting beneath my family's feet, and they were scrambling to find their footing. But for the first time in decades, I felt steady, rooted in my own worth rather than their approval. Let them scramble. It was time they learned to stand on their own. Happy birthday, Mom. I looked up from my gardening to see all three of my children walking across my backyard, carrying flowers, gift bags, and what appeared to be a homemade cake. For a moment, my heart lifted. They'd remembered. They'd come together. They were here. Then I remembered it wasn't my birthday. My birthday was in October. This was June. What's the occasion? I asked, pulling off my gardening gloves. We wanted to surprise you, Jenna said, her smile too bright, too forced. A little celebration just because. Daniel set the cake on my patio table. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. Your favorite. It wasn't my favorite, but I didn't correct him. Mark carried a bouquet of roses that looked suspiciously like the ones from the grocery store. Nothing like the carefully tended varieties I'd been nurturing in my own garden. Should we go inside? Emily suggested, herding her children toward the back door. As we settled in my living room, I watched my children exchange glances. There was an orchestrated quality to their cheerfulness, a rehearsed feel to their conversation. This wasn't a spontaneous celebration. It was an intervention. Mom, you look wonderful, Jenna said, cutting the cake with unnecessary precision. How are you feeling about your surgery next week? I'm managing fine. Are you nervous? Daniel asked. The question surprised me. It was the first time any of them had asked me about my emotional state regarding the surgery. A little, I admitted. Maybe we should talk about arrangements, Mark said. And there it was. The real reason for this. Gathering? What kind of arrangements? For your recovery. You'll need help for a few weeks. I accepted the slice of cake Jenna offered me. I've made arrangements. What kind of arrangements? Emily asked. Gloria will drive me to and from the hospital. I've hired a cleaning service for a few weeks. I've stocked up on groceries and meals. They looked disappointed, as if they'd expected me to be helpless and grateful for their belated offer of assistance. Mom, Mark said carefully, we know things have been tense lately. Have they? Don't play dumb, Daniel said, then caught himself. I mean, yes, they have. We want to work things out, Jenna added quickly. We're family. I set down my fork and looked at each of them in turn. Are we? Of course we are, Mark said. Just because we had a disagreement about what, exactly? About the loan situation and the babysitting thing and my medical bills? The room went quiet. Let me ask you something, I continued. If we're family, why am I facing surgery alone? Why am I hiring strangers to help me when I have 3 healthy adult children? We offered to help, Jenna protested. When? Just now. Just now, 3 weeks after I told you the surgery was scheduled. After I'd already made other arrangements. After it became clear I wasn't going to continue being your emergency solution to every problem. Mark leaned forward. Mom, what do you want from us? It was a fair question, and I'd been thinking about it for weeks. What did I want? I want you to see me, I said simply. We see you. No, you see what I can do for you. You see the babysitting, the money, the house, the solutions to your problems. But you don't see me. I stood up and walked to the secretary. Desk in the corner of the room, the one that had belonged to Richard's mother, the one where I kept important papers. Since we're having this conversation, there are some things you should know. I pulled out the manila folder I'd been organizing for weeks and returned to my chair. What's that? Daniel asked. A ledger. a record of every financial transaction between us over the past 15 years. I opened the folder and began reading. Mark, business loan co-signing, $200,000 outstanding debt. Direct loans, $43,000 over 8 years. Legal fee assistance when you were sued by that client, $8,000. Mark's face went pale. Jenna, down payment assistance for your first house, $30,000. Mortgage payments during Tom's unemployment, $12,000. Car repair loans, $4,500. Various emergency funds, $8,200. Jenna started crying quietly. Daniel, culinary school tuition, $18,000. Car purchase, $15,000. Rent assistance over the past 2 years, $14,400. Credit card debt payments, $6,000. Bail money from that unfortunate incident when you were 28, $2,500. Daniel stared at the floor. Total financial support provided to my 3 children over 15 years, $361,600. The silence was deafening. That doesn't include babysitting hours, emergency childcare, holiday hosting, birthday parties, graduation celebrations, or the countless times I've rearranged my life to accommodate your needs. Mom, Mark said weakly, we never asked you to keep track like that, didn't you? Because when I asked for help with my medical bills, the first thing you all said was that you couldn't afford it. You talked about your own expenses, your own obligations, your own financial pressures. So I thought it might be helpful to put things in perspective. I closed the folder and set it on the coffee table. There's something else you should know. This house, the one where we're sitting right now, it's paid off. Has been for 3 years. The mortgage you think I still have? That was paid off with Richard's life insurance money. Mark looked stunned. You told me you were still making payments. I never told you that. You assumed it, and I didn't correct you. Why not? Because I was protecting you from feeling guilty about asking for money from a woman with no mortgage payments. I pulled out another document. I also own the rental property on Maple Street downtown. It generates $1,800 a month in income. Has for the past 4 years. You're rich, Daniel said, sounding almost accusatory. I'm comfortable. Comfortable enough that your medical emergency wouldn't have been a financial crisis for me. Just an inconvenience. Then why didn't you just pay for your own surgery? Jenna asked. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about finding out whether my children loved me enough to help when I needed them. The room fell silent again. And what did you find out? Mark asked quietly. I found out that you love what I provide, but you don't love me enough to provide anything in return. Emily spoke up for the first time. That's not fair, Linda. The kids love you. Do they? When was the last time any of them called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time they invited me somewhere that wasn't about childcare? When was the last time they offered to help me with anything? No one answered. I spent 30 years putting your needs first, your comfort first, your happiness first. And when I finally needed something from you, you made it clear that your own comfort was more important than my well-being. We were going through tough times, Jenna said. So was I. I was facing surgery alone, dealing with medical bills that would wipe out my savings, scared about the diagnosis and the recovery. But somehow my tough time was less important than yours. I stood up and gathered the papers. From now on, things are going to be different between us. Different how? Mark asked. Different in that I'm going to treat you the way you've been treating me. What does that mean? It means I'm going to be selectively available. I'm going to consider my own needs before I consider yours. I'm going to set boundaries and stick to them. And if we don't like it, Daniel asked, then you'll learn what it feels like to be disappointed by family. They left shortly after that, taking their cake and their forced cheerfulness with them. Emily whispered something to Mark about talking sense into me later, as if I were having some kind of breakdown instead of a breakthrough. After they were gone, I sat in my quiet house and thought about what I'd just done. For the first time in 30 years, I'd told my children the complete truth about our relationship. Not the sanitized version where I pretended their selfishness didn't hurt, but the raw reality of what it felt like to be taken for granted by the people I loved most. Gloria called that evening. How did it go? I showed them the ledger. All of it? Every penny, every favor, every sacrifice. How did they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Shock, defensiveness, some tears. Any apologies? Not really. Mostly justifications for why their behavior was reasonable. Are you okay? I thought about it. I'm better than okay. I'm free. Free from what? Free from pretending that being used is the same as being loved. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Tomorrow I'd face surgery knowing that I'd finally told the truth about who I was and what I deserved. Whatever happened next would be based on honesty instead of manipulation, boundaries instead of enablement. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to finding out who my children really were when they couldn't take me for granted anymore. The call came at 6 a.m, 3 days after my surgery. I was still groggy from pain medication, struggling to reach my bedside phone without aggravating my incisions. Mom? Daniel's voice was shaky, panicked. I'm sorry to call so early, but I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I sat up carefully, immediately more alert. What kind of trouble? I got evicted. The landlord changed the locks yesterday. All my stuff is on the street. Why were you evicted? I'm 3 months behind on rent. I thought I could catch up, but then my hours got cut again and… Daniel, you got promoted. Tyler told me about your new position. Months ago. Silence. Daniel? Okay. Yes, I got promoted. But then I made some bad decisions. I started gambling a little just to try to make some extra money and… How much did you lose? Everything. My rent money, my car payment, money I borrowed from friends. Mom, I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of maternal instinct warring with the boundaries I'd spent months establishing. Where are you staying? In my car. But Mom, winter's coming and I can't live like this. I need help. Before my surgery, I would have already been getting dressed, planning to drive over with my checkbook. Now, recovering and medicated, I had to think differently. Daniel, I'm 4 days out of surgery. I can barely walk to the kitchen. I know. I'm not asking you to come get me. I just need some money. Enough for a deposit on a new place, maybe help with first month's rent. How much? $4,000 should cover it. $4,000. The same amount I'd declined to lend him 6 months ago when he'd first asked for help with some bills. Daniel, I can't. Can't or won't. Both. I can't, because I'm recovering from surgery, and I won't, because this is exactly the kind of crisis I've been enabling you to create. Enabling? His voice rose. Mom, I'm homeless. I'm sleeping in my car. And whose choices led to that situation? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. You had a good job, a promotion, income. You chose to gamble it away. It wasn't like that. I was trying to solve my problems. By creating bigger problems. Daniel, I've given you tens of thousands of dollars over the years. Where did that money go? He couldn't answer because we both knew where it had gone, into the same irresponsible decisions that had led to this moment. Mom, please. I'm your son. You're also a 35-year-old man who needs to face the consequences of his choices. So you're just going to let me be homeless? I'm going to let you figure out how to solve the problem you created. After he hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being cruel or wise. The old me would have had Gloria drive me to the bank, would have emptied my savings account if necessary to rescue him. The new me understood that rescue wasn't love, It was postponement of inevitable lessons. 2 weeks later, I was feeling stronger when Jenna called. "Mom, how are you feeling?" "Better each day. Thank you for asking." "Good, good. Listen, I need to talk to you about something important." I braced myself. "Tom lost his job again." "I'm sorry to hear that." "It's been really hard. We're behind on everything: mortgage, car payments, credit cards. The kids need school, supplies, and Megan needs glasses." "That sounds stressful." "It is. We've been trying to figure out what to do and, well, we were hoping you might be able to help us out." "Help how?" "Maybe let us move in with you for a while, just until Tom finds something new?" I almost laughed. "Move in with me?" "Just temporarily. A few months at most. It would save us the mortgage payment and give us time to get back on our feet." "Jenna, I'm still recovering from surgery. I can barely take care of myself." "We'd help take care of you. It would be perfect. We'd all be together, and where would you sleep? Where would the children sleep? You have that big master bedroom, and we could put the kids in the guest room." "You want me to give up my bedroom so your family can move into my house?" "Just temporarily." "So I can subsidize your housing while Tom looks for work?" "Mom, we're desperate." "How desperate? Desperate enough to ask your siblings for help?" "Mark and Emily are dealing with their own problems. Did you hear about his law practice?" "What about Mark's law practice?" I asked, settling back into my chair. The phone conversation with Jenna had taken an interesting turn. "He's being investigated by the state bar. Something about mishandling client funds. Emily's beside herself, and they might lose their house." I absorbed this information quietly. Mark, who had built his entire identity around being successful and superior, was facing professional ruin. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my children suffer. "Mom, we need to stick together as a family right now. That's why I was hoping we could move in with you. We could help each other through these tough times." "Jenna, let me ask you something. When was the last time you helped me through tough times?" Silence. "When I told you about my surgery, you said you couldn't afford to help. Now you're asking me to house, feed, and support your entire family because you can't afford your own expenses. That's different." "How?" Because we're family. We were family when I needed help too." After Jenna hung up, I called Gloria to update her on the latest developments. "So all three of them are in crisis at the same time?" she asked. "Daniel's homeless, Jenna wants to move her whole family in here, and Mark is facing a professional ethics investigation." "That's quite a coincidence." "Is it? Or is it the natural consequence of people who never learn to manage their own lives because someone was always there to catch them?" 2 days later, Mark showed up at my door. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled suit, dark circles under his eyes. "Mom, can I come in?" I let him in and made coffee, noting how he slumped in the kitchen chair that had once barely contained his arrogant presence. "I suppose you heard about the bar investigation." Jenna mentioned it. "It's bad, Mom. Really bad. I made some stupid mistakes with client money. I was trying to make up for some bad investments, and I thought I could replace the funds before anyone noticed." "That's called embezzlement, Mark." He flinched. "I know what it's called. The point is, I'm probably going to lose my license. Emily's talking about divorce. We're going to lose the house, and I don't know what to do." I sipped my coffee and studied my eldest son. For the first time in his adult life, he looked genuinely humble. "What do you want from me?" "I need to borrow money, enough to make the client account whole and maybe keep the house." "How much?" $200,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. $200,000? "I know it's a lot, but you co-signed my business loan. If I go under, you're liable for that debt anyway. This way, you're protecting your own investment." The manipulative logic was so perfectly Mark that I almost admired it. Even in desperation, He was trying to make his problem my responsibility. Mark, I'm not giving you $200,000. Lending, he corrected quickly. I'll pay you back. With what? You're losing your career. I'll figure something out. I always do. No, you don't. I always do. I figure it out. I fix it. I make it work. You just show up to collect the benefits. His face hardened. That's not fair, isn't it? When you needed help with law school, who paid? When your first business failed, who bailed you out? When you got sued for malpractice 3 years ago, who covered your legal fees? You're my mother. That's what mothers do. And when I needed help with my medical bills, what did you do? He looked away. That was different. How? Your situation wasn't an emergency. I stood up and walked to the same secretary desk where I'd retrieved the ledger weeks earlier. This time, I pulled out a different folder. What's that? Your father's will. Mark went very still. Your father left me everything as expected, but there's something else he included that you don't know about. I opened the folder and found the relevant page. He established a provision that in the event of any of his children showing substantial ingratitude or financial irresponsibility toward their mother, their inheritance could be revoked and donated to charity instead. He can't do that. Actually, he can. It's called a conditional bequest, and it's perfectly legal. Your father was a smart man, Mark. He knew his children and he knew me. He knew I'd be too generous for my own good. I showed him the relevant paragraph, watching his face go white as he read. The inheritance is substantial. This house, the rental property, investments, savings. Split 3 ways, it would be about $400,000 each, more than enough to solve all your current problems. What are you saying? I'm saying that your inheritance exists, but it's conditional on how you treat me while I'm alive. Your father wanted to make sure I was taken care of, and that my children appreciated what they had. Mark stared at the document. How long has this provision been in effect? Since the day he wrote the will. 15 years ago. And you never told us? I hoped I'd never need to. Mark was quiet for a long time, processing this new information. Mom, I know I've been difficult, self-centered, but I love you. Do you? Or do you love what I represent to your financial security? That's not fair. Mark, 3 months ago, when I told you I needed help with medical bills, you couldn't spare $1,000. Today, you're asking me for $200,000. How is that love? He put his head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this. Start by taking responsibility for your choices instead of expecting me to fix them. And if I do that, then we can have a real relationship, one based on mutual respect instead of financial dependence. That evening, all 3 of my children showed up at my door together. They looked like a defeated army. Daniel hollow-eyed from sleeping in his car, Jenna clutching tissues, Mark still wearing his wrinkled suit. We need to talk, Mark said. I let them in, and we sat in the same living room where I'd revealed the ledger weeks earlier. But the dynamic was completely different now. They weren't here to manage me or manipulate me. They were here because they had no other choice. We've been talking, Jenna said, about everything, about how we've treated you, about what we expected from you. And we were wrong, Daniel said quietly. All of us. I waited. I've been thinking about what you said, Mark continued, about seeing you versus seeing what you could do for us. And you were right. I can't remember the last time I called you just to talk, or invited you somewhere that wasn't about what you could provide. I can't remember the last time I thanked you for anything, Jenna added, tears starting again. I just expected you to be available whenever I needed you. I've been living like a teenager, Daniel said, expecting someone else to catch me every time I screwed up. I looked at each of them, seeing something I hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse. "What do you want from me now?" "We want to make it right," Mark said, "but we don't know how." "Start by telling me what you need, not what you want me to give you, but what you need to learn to do for yourselves." Mark spoke first. "I need to face the consequences of my choices. I need to make restitution to my clients and accept whatever punishment the bar decides. And I need to figure out how to rebuild my life without expecting you to fund it." Jenna nodded. "I need to learn to manage my own household without running to you every time things get difficult. And I need to include you in our lives because I want you there, not because I need something." Daniel took a shaky breath. "I need to grow up. I need to learn that my decisions have consequences and that love doesn't mean someone will always clean up my mistakes." For the first time in months, I felt hope. "Those are good starts," I said. "But words are easy. Actions are harder." "What do you want us to do?" Mark asked. "I want you to prove that you can stand on your own." "Mark, handle your legal problems yourself." "Jenna, find solutions to your housing situation that don't involve me." "Daniel, figure out how to get off the street using your own resources." And then? "And then we'll see if we can build a relationship based on mutual respect instead of dependence." "What about Dad's will?" Mark asked quietly. "What about it? Are you going to invoke the clause?" I considered the question carefully. "That depends entirely on what you do next." They left that night with something they'd never had before: clear expectations and real consequences. For the first time in 30 years, I'd told them exactly what I needed from them instead of simply giving them whatever they wanted. Over the following weeks, I watched them struggle with their new reality. Mark hired a public defender and began the process of making restitution to his clients. Jenna moved her family in with her in-laws temporarily and started looking for work. Daniel found a friend who let him sleep on a couch in exchange for help with yard work. None of it was easy, and they all called me at various points, frustrated and overwhelmed. But I held firm to my boundaries, offering emotional support without financial rescue. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Gloria observed during one of our weekly lunches. "What is?" "Watching them struggle without stepping in." "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted. "Every instinct tells me to fix their problems. But you're not." "No, because I finally understand that fixing their problems was preventing them from becoming the adults they needed to be." 3 months after our family meeting, Mark called with news. "I reached a settlement with the Bar Association. I'm suspended for 2 years, but I can apply for reinstatement if I complete some ethics courses and make full restitution. How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, actually. It's better than I deserved, and it gives me a chance to rebuild the right way. What will you do in the meantime?" "Emily and I are working things out. She's going back to work, and I'm going to handle more of the household responsibilities. We're selling the big house and buying something smaller that we can actually afford. I'm proud of you for taking responsibility. It feels better than I expected it to. Scary, but better." A week later, Jenna called. "I got a job. It's just part-time at first, but it's in accounting, which I can do from home some days." "That's wonderful. How are things with Tom?" "Better. Having to solve our problems together instead of running to you has actually brought us closer." "And Mom?" "Yes? I'm sorry it took a crisis for me to realize how much I've been taking you for granted." Daniel was the last to call, and his news was the most surprising. "I'm moving to Colorado." "Colorado?" "I got a job offer from a restaurant chain. Out there. It's a management position, and they're willing to train me. I figure it's time for a fresh start somewhere I can't fall back on old patterns." "That sounds like a big step." "It is. Mom, I know I've been the most irresponsible of all of us. I want you to know that I understand what you were trying to teach us." "Which was?" "That love isn't the same as enabling, and that I can't be a man until I stop acting like a child." As summer turned to fall, I found myself in a position I hadn't experienced in decades. I was no longer the family crisis manager. My children were handling their own problems, making their own decisions, living their own lives. For my 64th birthday in October, something unprecedented happened. All three children called to wish me happy birthday without asking for anything. Mark and Emily sent flowers. Jenna and her family came for dinner, bringing food and cleaning up afterward. Daniel called from Colorado with stories about his new job and his new life. "How does it feel?" Gloria asked as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. "Different. Peaceful. Like I can finally breathe." "Any regrets?" "About standing up for myself? None. About the years I spent enabling them? Many." "You were doing what you thought was best." "I was doing what felt easiest in the moment. Real love is harder than I thought. It requires saying no sometimes." That night, I pulled out Richard's will one more time and read the conditional inheritance clause. My husband had been wiser than I'd given him credit for. He'd known that our children would need to learn respect the hard way. I thought about the choice I had to make, whether to honor the original inheritance plan or invoke the clause. My children had shown real growth over the past few months, but trust would take time to rebuild. I decided to wait another year before making any final decisions. Real change, I'd learned, took time to solidify. But for the first time in 30 years, I was optimistic about the future of my family. Not because they needed me, but because they finally saw me. And that, I realized, was worth more than any amount of money I'd ever given them. 1 year later, I stood in my kitchen preparing Thanksgiving dinner. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The difference was everything. "Mom, what can I do to help?" Jenna asked, rolling up her sleeves as she entered the kitchen. She'd arrived. An hour early, without being asked, bringing homemade rolls and her famous green bean casserole. "You could start the gravy while I check the turkey," I said, genuinely grateful for the offer. As we worked side by side, I marveled at how natural this felt. For years, holiday preparation had been a solitary burden I carried while my family relaxed in the living room, waiting to be served. Now Jenna was here by choice, contributing rather than just consuming. "How's the new job going?" I asked. "Really well. They offered me full-time hours starting in January, and Tom's been picking up steady work with the construction company. We should be able to move into our own place by spring." Jenna and her family had been living with Tom's parents since their financial crisis, an arrangement that hadn't been easy but had taught them both humility and gratitude. "I'm proud of how you've handled everything." She paused in stirring the gravy, her eyes glistening. "Mom, I know I can never make up for all the years I took you for granted, but I want you to know, I see you now, really see you. Not just as my mother, but as Linda, as a person with your own dreams and needs." Before I could respond, Mark appeared in the doorway. He looked healthier than he had in months. Rested, clean-shaven, wearing a simple sweater instead of his usual expensive suits. "Emily's setting the table and the kids are helping," he reported. "What else needs doing?" "Could you carve the turkey when it's ready?" I asked. "Of course." He moved to wash his hands at the sink. "Mom, I have some news to share with everyone later, but I wanted to tell you first. I've been accepted to teach a business ethics course at the community college. It's part-time, but it's a start." I smiled. "That's wonderful, Mark. How do you feel about teaching?" "Nervous, but excited. I think I have some hard-earned wisdom to share about what happens when you compromise your integrity." He paused. I never thought I'd be grateful for hitting rock bottom, but it taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. The front door opened, and I heard familiar voices. Daniel had arrived from Colorado with his girlfriend, Sarah, whom we'd all met for the first time that morning. "Something smells incredible," Daniel called out as he entered the kitchen, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. My youngest son looked transformed. He'd gained some healthy weight, his eyes were clear, and there was a confidence in his posture that I'd never seen before. The chaos and desperation that had defined him for so long had been replaced by genuine contentment. "How's the restaurant business treating you?" Mark asked, and I noticed the genuine interest in his voice. For years, my children had barely acknowledged each other's lives except to compete or complain. Now they actually seemed to care about each other. "Great, actually. We're opening a second location next spring, and they want me to manage it. Sarah and I are thinking about getting married next fall." Sarah, a quiet kindergarten teacher with kind eyes, squeezed Daniel's hand. "We wanted to ask if you'd all come to Colorado for the wedding. We know it's far, but family is important to us." "We'll be there," I said without hesitation, and meant it. A year ago, I would have been planning their wedding, paying for their wedding, and probably running their wedding. Now, I was simply being invited to celebrate their joy, and it felt perfect. As we gathered around the dinner table, the same table where so many tense conversations had taken place, I looked at the faces of my family and saw something miraculous. We were all still there. We'd all survived the reckoning, the consequences, the hard lessons. More than that, we'd grown. "Should we go around and say what we're thankful for?" Emily suggested, and everyone agreed. Mark went first. "I'm thankful for second chances and for learning that failure isn't the end of the world. It's just the beginning of wisdom." Jenna followed. "I'm thankful for learning that asking for help isn't the same as demanding it, and that independence actually brings families closer together." Daniel smiled at Sarah before speaking. "I'm thankful for discovering that I'm stronger than I thought, and that real love means supporting someone's growth, not enabling their weaknesses." The grandchildren shared sweet, simple gratitudes about toys and friends and turkey. Emily thanked everyone for welcoming her into what she called a family that figured out how to love each other better. When it came to my turn, I felt a calmness I hadn't experienced in decades. I'm thankful for learning that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to make someone else's problems your own. After dinner, as the family dispersed to various activities, some watching football, others playing with the children, Mark and Tom cleaning the kitchen without being asked, I found myself alone on the back porch with Gloria, who had joined us for dessert. "Look at them," she mused, watching through the window as my children laughed and talked together. "A year ago, I wasn't sure this family would survive what you were about to do." "Neither was I admitted. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was being cruel instead of wise." "Any regrets?" I considered the question, watching as Jenna helped her daughter with a puzzle while Mark listened patiently to his son's story about school. These weren't the desperate, entitled people who had dismissed my needs a year ago. These were adults who had learned to respect themselves and others. None. Not about standing up for myself, anyway. I regret that it took me so long to do it. What changed your mind? What made you finally draw the line? I realized that by constantly rescuing them, I was stealing their chance to become the people they were meant to be. I was keeping them as children because it made me feel needed, but children can't have real relationships with their parents. Only adults can. Gloria nodded toward the window where Daniel was showing Sarah old photo albums, pointing out family memories with genuine affection rather than the embarrassment or resentment that had colored his references to home for so many years. And now? Now they're adults. They make their own decisions, solve their own problems, and they're here because they want to be, not because they need something. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my living room with Richard's will in my lap. I'd been putting off this decision for months, but I knew it was time. The conditional inheritance clause had served its purpose. My children had learned to see me as a person worthy of respect, rather than just a resource to exploit. They'd proven over the past year that their changed behavior wasn't just temporary desperation, but genuine growth. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "Howard, it's Linda Carter. I need to make some changes to my will." "Of course. What kind of changes?" "I want to remove the conditional inheritance clause and restore the original bequests to my children." "Are you sure? That clause has been effective in—" "It's been effective in teaching them what they needed to learn, but I don't want to hold it over them forever. They've earned my trust back." "I'll draw up the papers." After hanging up, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The threat of disinheritance had been a tool, not a punishment. And now, it was time to put the tool away. 3 months later, I was surprised to find myself nervous as I prepared for another family gathering. This time, I'd called the meeting. I had something important to tell them. They arrived together, having carpooled from Mark's house, and I could see the curiosity and slight apprehension in their faces. The last time I'd called a family meeting, I'd presented them with the ledger of their debts to me. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Jenna asked as we settled in the living room. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I wanted to share some news with you." I pulled out a folder, not the ledger this time, but something entirely different. "I've made some changes to my will." They tensed, probably remembering the conditional inheritance clause I'd revealed during their crisis. "The clause about your inheritance being conditional on how you treated me? I've had it removed." The relief on their faces was immediate and touching. "But that's not the only change I've made," I continued. "I've also decided to make some gifts while I'm still alive to enjoy giving them." I handed each of them an envelope. "These are checks, not loans, not emergency funds, gifts. Mark, yours is enough to complete the restitution you still owe and maybe help with Emily's tuition for her nursing program. Jenna, yours should cover a down payment on that house you've been saving for. Daniel, yours is a wedding gift for you and Sarah." They stared at the envelopes in shock. "Mom," Mark said quietly, "we don't expect this. We haven't even asked." "I know you haven't asked. That's exactly why I'm giving. For 30 years, you took my generosity for granted. Now that you've learned not to expect it, I can give freely again." Jenna started crying. "But we don't deserve this. Not after how we treated you. You deserve it because you're my children and I love you. But more than that, you deserve it because you've proven you can stand on your own. These gifts won't make you dependent. They'll just make your lives a little easier." "What changed?" Daniel asked. "Why now?" "Because now I know that if I give you money, you won't see it as evidence that I exist to solve your problems. You'll see it as what it is. Love from your mother who wants to help you build the lives you're working so hard to create." We talked for another hour about their plans, their dreams, their futures. As they prepared to leave, each of them hugged. Me, not the obligatory distracted hugs of the past, but real embraces that conveyed genuine affection and gratitude. After they were gone, I called Gloria to share the news. "You gave them money again?" she asked, surprised. "After everything they put you through?" "I gave them gifts, not bailouts. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "A bailout is something you give to people who can't take care of themselves. A gift is something you give to people who can, but whom you want to bless anyway." "And you trust them not to come asking for more?" "I trust them to be grateful for what they received and to continue taking care of themselves. And if I'm wrong, I trust myself to say no." That spring, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I went on vacation by myself. A river cruise through Europe, something I'd always wanted to do but had never prioritized over my family's needs. I sent postcards to my children from each port, sharing my adventures and discoveries. Their responses weren't requests for souvenirs or complaints about my absence, but genuine excitement about my experiences and encouragement to enjoy every moment. When I returned, Tanned and relaxed and full of stories, I found my house exactly as I'd left it. No one had used my absence as an opportunity to borrow anything or move in temporarily. My children had respected my space because they'd learned to respect me. That summer, I attended Daniel and Sarah's wedding in Colorado. The whole family traveled there, not because I organized and paid for it, but because we all wanted to be there for Daniel. Watching him exchange vows with Sarah, seeing the pride and joy on his face, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with his success and everything to do with his character. During the reception, as I danced with Mark and laughed with Jenna and celebrated with Daniel, I realized something profound. I was no longer the invisible backbone of this family. I was a beloved member of it. The difference was everything. On the flight home, sitting next to Gloria, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. "Do you ever wonder how things would have turned out if you hadn't confronted them?" Gloria asked. "Sometimes. I think they would have kept taking until there was nothing left to take, and I would have given until there was nothing left of me. And now?" I looked out the airplane window at the clouds below, thinking about the grandchildren, who now called me just to chat. The children who included me in their lives because they enjoyed my company. The family gatherings that felt like celebrations instead of obligations. Now I have a family that loves me, not just what I can provide. I have self-respect. I have boundaries. I have a life that belongs to me. Was it worth it? All the pain and conflict and uncertainty? I thought about the woman I'd been a year and a half ago, invisible, resentful, exhausted from decades of giving without receiving. Then I thought about who I was now, respected, valued, free to be generous when I chose, and firm when I needed to be. It was worth everything, I said, because I finally learned that dignity isn't something other people can give you or take away. It's something you claim for yourself. As our plane descended toward home, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since Richard's death. My children were adults now, in the truest sense of the word. They could take care of themselves, appreciate what they had, and love without taking. And I? I was no longer just a mother. I was Linda Carter, a woman who had learned, perhaps later than she should have, but not too late to matter, that the most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. The story of our family wasn't perfect, but it was honest. We'd all learned that love isn't the same as sacrifice, that helping isn't the same as enabling, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach someone to stand on their own. It had taken 64 years, but I'd finally learned to put my own oxygen mask on first. And in doing so, I'd saved not just myself, but my entire family. That night, as I unpacked in my quiet house, my house where I lived because I chose to, not because anyone expected me to, I smiled at the stack of postcards on my kitchen counter. Notes from my children, sent just to say they missed me and hoped I was having fun. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with exactly the relationships I deserved, living exactly the life I'd chosen to create. And that, I realized, was the most valuable inheritance I could ever give my children. The example of a woman who had learned to value herself enough to demand that others value her too. In the end, the secret wasn't in the ledger of what I'd given them over the years. The secret was in learning when to stop giving and start requiring. The secret was in understanding that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just another word for fear. I'd spent 30 years being afraid that if I didn't give my children everything they wanted, they wouldn't love me. It took a medical crisis and a moment of profound rejection to teach me the truth. They couldn't really love me until I loved myself enough to demand their respect. Now finally, they did both. And so did I.